This is the podcast for entrepreneurs within the first 5 years of business who are tired of stuck and are ready to stomach the brutal truth. Here we discover the meaningless daily habits that keep you from protecting and growing your business. This is episode 5. The entrepreneur is always right. So let's jump in. Um, I had a client. Had a client that I actually um, made started some business with um, earlier this year. Um, so we were going into kind of the last part of that sales process. Um, it was it was a relatively quick sales process. I guess it took about a month and a half, almost 2 months. So we're going through that sales process, and we were right at the end. Like this is the last meeting to square away the last few details to get the contract signed. So going into this meeting, I think he had already sent an email about some things he um, was not happy with, and I don't remember if I knew the extent if I knew the extent of how not happy he was before we started the meeting or not. I think I did. I think I probably had at least a clue. But anyway, we got on the meeting, and he was hot. He was hot, and so uh, I knew then, and I look back now, and I definitely know, like I had a really big choice to make right in that moment. Like that was a really key. That was a pivotal point. Like we easily could have walked away from that meeting with a no sell. Like all the time and energy and investment over the last couple of months just down the drain. Both for him and for me. Like he was looking for a solution, which he had done his research and found out like that we were really good at what we do, um, and um, so he was looking for a solution. So um, that's kind of where this conversation picks up. We this topic is uh, this is a I don't know. I guess it kind of this topic kind of gets me a little bit. We as a society, like we spend a lot of time and energy trying to be right, trying to prove that we're right. Um, and it's like to me, like I'm a part of that. I have to cringe because I've been a part of that. I've been a part of that. Like I've been in IT, in the IT space, for about 20 years. And like that is as far as like the people I work with, the people um, with an IT mindset, like that's like number one. Being right is number one. Because it's like it's a matter of rep for us. I know. I mean, for many of you too, depending on where you work and what industries you work in, it's a matter of reputation. Um, like you don't get respect in your industry without people having a clue that you know what you're talking about. Um, and there's I guess, kind of a natural. I won't, I'll call it natural, but it's not really natural. Um, there's an understandable perception that if someone kind of sees a place where you miss it, you drop the ball, then all of a sudden that their view of you as someone who's competent in your field will decrease. Um, and the thing is, it's not really true. Um, and I'm saying that from the perspective of me. I'm still working to um, that idea fully. And I say fully because I have done it enough. That is, allow myself to be in situations where I don't present myself as knowing all the answers and winding up being on the end of the situation and realizing that I receive more favor in that process, um, more goodwill, um, from the person that I'm talking to than I would have if I had come in saying, "Hey, look, I know what I'm talking about." Blah, 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 blah. It's like that saying, people don't know what people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Um, and it's true. It's true. Like especially for us, like I said, who are in like really um, intellectually taxing, demanding feels. Um, it's a hard thing to grasp. Like people are like you're not gonna like it, but people are emotional. Like we want to think that everybody is super logical and operates on logic, but like people don't. Um, so the thing is like we're talking here as entrepreneurs. Like we're not like some of you came from um, like stellar careers in corporate, um, from um, maybe nonprofit, from other spaces where like you were good at doing the thing. You did the thing. Everybody said yay because nobody knew how to do it like you. But like when we moved to this space of entrepreneurship, like the thing is great, but frankly, we never get to do the thing until we first do the connection with the people right. Um, if we don't get that right, then we never get to the point to do the thing, which means like you have these great skills, you have these great abilities, you have these great, um, yeah, these great assets that you never get to use unless you first like get on the same page with the clients, with the potential clients. So that kind of brings us to this topic of the saying, "The customer is always right." Um, and I know I've had a hard time grasping that throughout, um, like before I started in an entrepreneurship role, um, and through most of the time I've been an entrepreneur. But really, definitely in the last 3 or 4, but probably about the last 5 years, I've started to grasp like what that means. Um, and there's a truth to that. Um, my actually my therapist that I see, she has this thing where she's like therapy is the only field where the customer is always wrong. And the thing is like there's a part about that she's right, um, and there's a part of that she's not. Um, And I guess that kind of goes into the complexities of like the relationships that we deal with. And I don't mean like necessarily relationships with people. That's a whole nother level of complexity. But the relationships of um, the relationship between, right now will be a little bit vague, this and that. Um, which in this particular case, the relationship between um, you being right versus the customer being right. So, which is the same as the relationship between the customer's needs being met and your needs being met. So, as far as like the dichotomy between who's right and who's not, the distinction there is time. At least that's one of the distinctions. One of the distinctions there is time, and that's not the primary distinction. I'd say probably a greater one is circumstance. Is probably a better way of putting it. So, and then perspective too. So sometimes your customer can be looking at something from this angle, this one over here, and you're looking at it from this one over here. Uh, like you're both seeing the same thing, but you're seeing it from different angles, which means that each of you will have something different, true, and different that is mutually true. That is, your perspective, your customer's perspective is true. Your perspective is true. Both of them are true, but only one of you has that. Only one of you has one one part of the perspective at a time. So part of what we get to what we get to do with customers is, one, like we're there to help them. So like as far as our perspective is concerned, and like this is definitely true for like the yeah, this is definitely true for service providers. We we show up as the experts. We show up as the experts in our fields. And there's a lot that we know. There's a lot of information that we get to bring to the customer. There's a lot of information that we get to contribute to whatever the final end product is that the customer does not have the ability to provide. So ultimately, like there's a way that from that perspective, we are probably 90% at least right 90% of the time. So, and if there were a difference of opinions between the client and us, they would be wrong 90% of the time. That's probable. So maybe 85, but like it's likely that they'll be wrong somewhere in that range. So we look at it from that perspective. However, I think the thing that we miss is the client is always the expert on like their realm. So if we're working with a business client, that is, we're doing business with another business, like they're the expert on their business. They're the expert on, they're not only the expert on their business, but unless you're like a consultant to their business, to their industry, that is, you're a consultant to other businesses in their industry, like you're an industry consultant for helping businesses of a particular industry run their business. Like, unless you're that, then they're also the expert on their industry. So that is what works, what doesn't work. So like there's always a level where they are expert in something that we're not. And frankly, and this is definitely, well, it's for any role, any area, but I want to say especially for service, you don't have a successful engagement with a client. Like, even if you're selling them a product, or some products, you don't have a successful engagement with a client unless you take your expertise and their expertise about what they need, their business, how things work in their business. Um, and both of those come together. Like, you can't have a successful sales engagement um, without those two coming together. And so, with that said, there's no room for showing up with kind of an attitude of like, you don't know what you're talking about. Let me show you what to do. And I'm speaking this from the perspective of, as a software developer, software engineer, um, IT architect. Like, I have done that many times, because like I show up to a client, they don't know anything about all the stuff I'm gonna do. Um, Now, thankfully, at least I've always had um, the sense to ask good questions, but and listen to the answers. But like behind the scenes, like I kind of listen to what they have to say, take it into consideration, um, made some assumptions um, of my own based on what I got from them, what I could see, what I could understand, um, and wound up delivering a product. Um, and I'm gonna say this: like, I feel like I've been blessed as to have not had super any super yeah, I haven't really had any like problems doing that. That is, any problems on the back end with delivery and what the client thinks. I haven't really had any problems doing that. However, like, looking back, I see the potential for that. I haven't like the potential for that to have created pretty big problems. That attitude. I know, and I know you're probably like, what, how could it? So this thing about attitude. So it's just the idea that we actually convey. We're going to convey the attitudes that we have. Like, I forgot. I'm trying to remember where I heard this from, but effectively it's kind of a quote to the effect that the attitudes that like we have inside of us, that is the way that we position our thinking towards something, are will always give themselves a voice. They'll always give themselves expression, regardless of whether or not we're trying to intentionally, regardless of whether we're trying to intentionally conceal them. Um, whether we're trying to intentionally hide them, they're always going to give themselves a voice. They're always going to tell on themselves. They have to be expressed. They have to be, because they're in us. Like, so they have to be expressed at some point. So if my attitude towards the client is, you don't know what you're talking about, like, that can't make for a good long-term working relationship. At some point, they're going to feel that. Um, and even though I deliver, even though I get results, it just makes for a vulnerable position, business wise, that if somebody else comes along that seems to care more about them, then my client's interested. Um, they're interested in making that switch. So, and then too, as far as like actually delivering, that attitude actually has the potential of me delivering something that's spending tons of time and energy delivering something, working on something that won't really be in the best interest of my client. And I say this from the perspective of thankfully, I've gotten saved from those situations several times. But I've been in situations where I saw things one way, um, and I thought, okay, this is how they need it. And then wound up thankfully, having conversations with the client, um, where we got into discussing like some things I had already made assumptions about. And so thankfully, like, we got into the conversations of like of of the differences, um, between what I was thinking and what was actually true for them. So had I gone down the road of following just what I had already made up, what I had already assumed, and sometimes I had gone down that path a little, but it wasn't too far enough to where I couldn't turn back. Um, had I continued going down that path, I would have like we could have gotten to the end and been like, here, here's the product, and they're like, we can't use this because of these minor things over here that could have been corrected ahead of time, which now it's like I had to tear the whole thing apart to undo, um, and redo, the thing correctly. So thankfully, I've been able to avoid situations like that. However, I do realize that, though, I'll say it like this: those situations, when I've been in them, have given me an opportunity to grow in a lot more humility, because of the fact that I realized, like, if I had not listened to this person, if I had not had this conversation with this person, then I um I would have been I would have been messed up. So it's like, okay, going forward, I don't want to be in a situation like that. So let me step back a little bit, and be more of a mindset of learning, and always learning, not getting to a point of, okay, I know it all. I can go from here. So yeah. So effectively, like this this whole need to be, um, sometimes like we feel like we want to be, like, it feels good to be right. Um, like, it feels good. Like, I like to be right. I don't like to be wrong, and I don't have anymore. I don't have any trouble admitting that, because it's true. The thing is I believe it hurts us when we like effectively worship that. when we like it at all costs, I need to be right. If I need to prove you wrong for me to be right, let me do it. And I've done that many times. In fact, I had a conversation with some friends, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, where yeah, I pushed it too far. I pushed it too far. Uh, it was a good conversation. It was a productive conversation. There was some disagreement there, um, but it was a good conversation until the the I'm right stuff started showing up. Because at that point, it's like no one's trying to hear anybody else anymore. And no, we weren't shouting and screaming or anything, but it's just like, okay, let me present this argument and let me present this argument. And then arguments start coming out of nowhere that don't really have anything to do with the conversation the direction of the conversation was going in. So it's more like getting to a place of deflection and confusion, as opposed to like this is a productive conversation. So yeah, and that stuff doesn't feel good. It doesn't look good. Like the result of it isn't like isn't any good. Like for me, like I needed to after that I knew I needed to apologize and say, hey, look, I I I I went off the tracks on this one. Um, because instead of like honoring the relationship and where the conversation was going and the productivity of the conversation, um, I switched into a mode of let me do everything I can to prove intellectually that I'm right, which never, never, never works. Um, Somebody else can prove me wrong, please do, but yeah, it just never works. Which actually takes us back to the client that I was telling you about here at the start. So the sale that I was making, we got into that meeting. The thing is, I knew, and then I learned this from Zig Ziglar, who is or was a sales trainer, really really good. Like if you have the opportunity to pick up any of his stuff, I highly recommend it. Um, but I learned this from him that effectively, when someone's hot, like the best thing you can do is just let them talk. Just let them talk. Don't interject. Don't interrupt. Don't do anything like you might give. Like for the most part, just like do nothing. Just listen. Don't tune them out. In other words, pay attention, listen. Um, but one of the things that I heard from Zig Ziglar is effectively, for the most part, if you do that, they can go for about 2, maybe 3 minutes. That's it. Like, don't say anything, don't interject, or anything. 2 or 3 minutes. And I tried that, and sure enough, he went for about 2, maybe 3 minutes, 2.5, something like that. And after that, he was almost like, okay, kind of asking me questions. Uh, and so it was a point of effectively our disagreement was a contractual um, I guess a clause in a contract that we disagreed on. And for me in that point, it wasn't about like I didn't have to say, oh no, you can have it. Okay, it's okay. I didn't have to do any of that. Like I got to honor like what I saw as being the truth in that situation, and at the same time honor him, because there's a part of him he was expressing how he saw the situation and his perspective, and my response after he finished, after he kind of let the stage go, um, was I got to talk to him about to express like that I could see how he saw things, like how he saw things. That there's a way that makes sense to him in that, um, that I could understand the way he sees it, um, and like instead of going to try to prove how I'm right, um, I gave some. In fact, one I listened, um, because he gave in his spiel, he gave um, some ideas, or at least an idea, for a way that we could resolve the situation. Which, had I not listened to him, I would not have picked that up. Like there was all of the stuff that could have thrown me off, but had I not listened, I would not have picked that up. And I came with some suggestions to present to him too. That is kind of like an alternative. Like, how can we do this in a way that honors the way that this client feels, um, and at the same time honor like what really is the truth. Like, yeah, like what's going to be beneficial for everybody. So, including me. So that is, to me, that is the approach I believe that will help you, in negotiations, in engagements with clients going forward. Um, that is, if we approach them with the attitude, with a from the position of I can take the time to sit and listen to where you're coming from. Not only can I take the time to sit and listen to where you're coming from, I can also identify with what you're going through, where your thought process is going, where you're getting your conclusions. And at the same time, say, because I can identify with where you are, the thoughts that you have going on, what you're feeling right now, here are some potential options that'll help honor where you are. And at the same time, those are things that'll be simultaneously honoring what I know to be true and what I know will work for going forward. So I think I think that's an excellent place to be, and it'll help in building long-term relationships with long-term relationships with clients, and um, in business that's gold. So that's all I have for today. This has been a good one. I feel like there'd be a nice part two for this one at some point. Anyway, leave some comments in the notes if you get a chance to see this, and let me know like some episodes or some situations where this being right thing has popped up for you in dealings with your clients, or even in relationships that you've had. But that is really all I have for today. Again, we're here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right now, I think we're going to be going live 8:30 Central Standard Time, or Central Time. Right now, we're on daylight. Yeah, but yeah, so should be going live 8:30 a.m. Central Time, um, on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So looking forward to more. Take care. Bye.